What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Help Me Close Sales School, where I have conversations with sales leaders around the world with one purpose in mind: to help you and me become the best that we can be in the world of sales. Recently, I had the great opportunity to speak with Devid Hoffeld, who is the author of The Science of Selling. I loved this book and this conversation with David because it really struck home with me. I had the opportunity in college to get my degree in psychology, so I love studying human behavior, and I also really like the research behind it, and that is something that David is an expert in. And when I say research, I'm not just talking about going on Google and just seeing, top articles that come up. I'm talking about real research with statistically significant data. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation with David, so stay tuned. You're going to love it. Also, be sure to subscribe to the Help Me Close YouTube channel here so you can get notified of my videos as they come out weekly. Again, here's my conversation with Devid Hoffeld. Hey closers, Maxwell here. Today I have a special guest. We have Devid Hoffeld with us, who is the author of The Science of Selling. Very interesting book. I've really enjoyed what I've been able to read so far. David, thank you for being here with us today.
Hey,
really
Maxwell. Yeah, it's a pleasure. Great to be with you.
So, David, first off, introduce us a little bit to yourself, your background, and then your book, Science of Selling.
Yeah, I'm Devid Hoffeld, the CEO and Chief Sales Trainer at my firm, the Hoffeld Group. We're a little different kind of sales training firm in that everything we do is based on scientific research. So we read scientific journals from social psychology, cognitive psychology, social neuroscience, and then we make those principles we find in that science simple, and we apply it to selling, and it guides salespeople in selling more. And so that's what I'm all about. Very passionate about it. I love it because I've seen the difference. Now, when salespeople align how they sell with how your buyer's brains make buying decisions, they're instantly more effective.
So you wrote this book, The Science of Selling. It was published, I believe, last November, right? So November
Yes.
2016.
Yep.
What separates this book from other sales books, for example?
Can sum it up really in one word, and that is science. In the book alone, for example, we have citations to over 400 different academic journals. So every idea in the book is based on the science of how our brains create preferences, how we make choices, how different things influence us within the buying process. And so we believe that selling should be based on one thing: buying. How do your buyer's brains construct the buying decision? Why do they choose to trust you and not another salesperson? Why do they choose one product or service over another? And once you understand some of these ideas that science has disclosed through thousands of scientific studies over the last 50, 60 years, once you understand some of this, you can apply it easily into the real world of selling, and you become more effective. Why? Because you're helping your buyers make confident buying decisions. And that's really what the role of a salesperson is. It's to guide people through the buying process and into that positive buying decision.
I love it. You and I were discussing before, but for those who are listening and watching who don't know, my background is in psychology. That's what I graduated in college. And so what David's talking about here really hits home with me, because I think what we've seen in the past a lot from other sales books and sales trainings is you have these sales professionals who have had successful sales careers, and then they break down that success and what they've done, and then they've gone back and they've tried to find research to back up what they've already done. Right. But I think what I've been able to see so far in talking with you, David, is you kind of done it the opposite. Instead of saying, okay, this is what's brought me success, you're starting from home base, and that's the customer, and you're building it from there.
Exactly right. Yeah, when I first got into this science, I was a top performing salesperson. I mean, in numerous industries, I've been a sales manager, a VP of sales, and I stumbled on really an academic journal in social psychology, and I thought, boy, this is really applicable to what I do every day, selling. And so I applied what I learned, and I said, that seems to be working. Is there more like this? And so I began having a very odd hobby, and that is I would read academic journals at night, on the weekends. It was actually a problem. And I became obsessed with it. And I saw such results, and my sales went up. And I'd always been good. And so what it did for me and other salespeople that are at a very high level that I've trained since that time is they say, now I understand why I am effective. I know what's going on behind the scenes, and now I can adapt and be even more effective because I know it wasn't just this magical phrase or this process, but I know why it worked. And for everyone, including myself and every other top performer, we always too find things that we're not doing well, that things we can improve on, that we're successful in spite of. And science reveals that. So regardless of where you are on your sales journey, armed with the scientific data, anyone and everyone can improve their sales performance with the science.
That you took the words right out of my mouth. That was the thought that was going through my head, is that when you have it broken down into a science like you have, it's not just, hey, I'm an extrovert, so I'm good at sales, or, we also have those introverts who are good at sales equally, but there's no one type of person that's good at sales. It's anybody can take this, they can learn it, they can apply it, because it's it's a science. No, there's no better way of putting it. But with that too, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on people saying that sales is an art? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is a big debate, right? And if you read a lot of articles, is sales an art or a science? Most people will write, it's yes. They'll say it's both. It's art and science. And some bold people will even speculate. It's 30% science, 70% art, and others will disagree. How does anyone know that? So we're all just sharing our opinions. So the way I answer that question today is based on the data that you can verify for yourself. I mean, there's thousands of studies. We just cite hundreds of them in the book, but there's many more you can look at, that sales now for the first time can be based on science. So it's based on science. Now applying that science, that comes into the art. But now we don't have to base it on an art, meaning we don't have to try to guess our way to success. We don't have to try to replicate the way the guy in the office next to me sells. Now instead, we can base it on how our buyers buy. And then with that science as our foundation, now we build our strategies, our tactics, and that involves some level of, that's the art of it. But when you have that foundation, you're effective, because you're starting at the place, as we talked about a little earlier in the pre-call, Maxwell, you're starting with the buyer. And too often the problem in selling is that we're focused on us as sellers, and instead we forget about the buyer. And starting with the science as our foundation, it forces us to focus on our buyer. How do our brains create preferences? Well, that influences how I'm going to present my product or service to you. How do you make choices? What does that buying journey look like? And science has revealed all this. So I've said it's never been a more exciting time to be in sales because of this explosion of scientific research.
Definitely. No, I love what you're saying. And I love that answer, because I'm similar mindset, is that, I've always kind of felt that it's a mix between the two of both science and an art form of, language and being able to present and demonstrate. And so I like how with your book, you've been able to almost flip it over, instead of saying it's an art form first, then science. No, it's in science first, and then how you apply it is the art form. Little metaphor or simile would be like, a painter, you can learn how to paint different strokes on a canvas, how to mix different colors, and that would be the science of it. But then how you apply that is up to the artist, and what masterpiece they're going to create is up to them. So no, I love what you're saying. Love the answer. I'm all in. So David, your book is just filled with a wealth of information. What has been your favorite section of the book to write, and why?
Yeah, my favorite section is based on about 6.5 years of research. And it's in chapter 3. And we looked at how does the brain make a buying decision? And through that testing and leveraging really decades of scientific research as our foundation, we said, okay, what does this look like in a real sales process, on a real sales cycle? What has to happen inside my mind for me to say yes to you and buy your product or service? And what we found was that commitments matter. In fact, commitments are the building blocks of the sale. Now, that's a not that unique idea. For a long time, we in sales have known commitments matter. But what commitments? And why those and not others? So we said if commitments matter, a lot of science has shown that commitments are how we make big decisions. What commitments? And so we tested for this. And in about 6.5 years, we found the specific commitments that our brains must commit to for a buying decision to occur. And if we don't get a commitment, the buying process breaks down and results in an objection. And so what we've seen is we've put these in the book, and we've been teaching them for years as well. And when salespeople apply it, in fact, I just got an email from a person last week who said that she read the book on like a Sunday night, read that chapter, and on Monday she had a big presentation. So on Sunday night, she redid her presentation to obtain these commitments or address them. And she said it was the best sales presentation she ever had. In fact, she closed the deal at the end of the presentation, and she said that had never happened before. Now, why is that? Why did that work? Because she was literally selling the way that her buyers' brains are wired to make buying decisions, meaning she helped them through the buying journey, and that sped up the sales cycle and allowed them to say yes at the end of that presentation, something that never happens normally. And so that's just one example. But yeah, that's my favorite part of the book because I'll be honest, that was a lot of work to get those commitments, a lot of time, resources to find them. But boy, it is so powerful. And armed with those insights, it will improve any sales performance.
So I'm going to ask you to spill the beans here. What are those commitments? Is that something you can tell us?
Yeah, sure. I can run through them. So we call them the 6 whys. And what they are, we frame it this way. There are 6 questions that begin with the word why. And these commitments are really the building blocks of the sale. And so we want to structure our sales processes to obtain commitment. And we talk about, too, how do you do that? How do you get the commitments? What do you say if people won't commit? But real quickly, what they are is the first one, the foundational one is why change. Right? This is our biggest competitor as salespeople. You and I, Maxwell, have lost more business to nothing than to someone. Meaning, a lot of times when people don't buy from us, they just don't buy. They stay with what we call the status quo bias. That they just do nothing. They wait. They procrastinate. And so how do you create a compelling case and get a commitment to change? Then, second why is why now? Okay, I need to change, but why do I need to do it now? Why can't I wait 6 months or a year or longer? Why should I do it now? Then we want to look at why your industry solution. Why can't I create a solution on my own? Why do I need you? Why you and your company is why number 4. So, okay, I know I need to make a change. I need to do something now. I can't do it, but why should I invest in you and the company? Why should I put my trust in you? Then why your product or service? Why number 5? And then last but not least, why spend the money? And this one's almost the one that salespeople forget about, meaning that if I'm selling, for example, a software package, they might say, we want your software package, but we only have enough money in the budget this year to either buy your software or some machinery for our factory. We can only buy one. I'm not sure what we're going to do. We got to think about this. And so now I'm competing against machinery. So how do I justify, create a business case for them to spend the money with me and not something else? And we have found that when you get commitments to all 6 of these whys, the sale is extremely likely to occur. If one of those is not committed to, they won't commit to it, the sale never occurs 100% of the time. In fact, I've done this for years now. When I meet with salespeople, doesn't matter in the industry, I can have them list their objections that they face, and I can tie them to one of those 6 whys. And so it allows us, as we get commitments to those throughout the process, we can neutralize objections. There's some really exciting things that people have done with this since the book come out, and then, of course, with our clients prior to that. So those 6 whys are mission critical, and we lay out in the book exactly how to get commitments to them and how do you ask for commitments, what do you do if they won't commit, and so on. But that's probably the most impactful thing in the book.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what really stuck out to me, too, was I think it was why number 4. It was why you and the company. And so I like how you mentioned why you, because when we're salespeople, yes, we're representatives of the company, but we also have to also explain and say why you should buy from me specifically versus someone else within the company. And I think that's something that we sometimes forget, maybe gets glazed over when a corporate is giving training, because the corporation wants you to focus on the corporation. But nowadays, especially with technology and personal brand being ever more important, I like how you included that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting research on that, which is why we frame the why that way. Basically, what the research really conclusively shows is that in most sales, unless you get in very early, which is another thing we can talk about, which is a huge competitive advantage, but assuming that your buyer comes to you or identifies themselves, the data shows right now, and this is very prevalent in sales, that around 60% of the buying process has already occurred. And so they know about your company, they know about your competitors, the ones you're competing with, but then they want to talk to a salesperson. And you still shape the perception of the company, meaning what you present to them, the way you present it, whether they trust you or not, that influences the rest of their buying journey and whether or not they decide to move forward with that company or not. So because salespeople shape perception, for example, if they don't trust you, Maxwell, they're not going to trust your company. They might say, well, it sounded good, but after talking to that guy, I'm not interested. Or vice versa. If you come across very trustworthy and you present effectively and understand their needs and connect the dots for them, and they say, wow, it sounded good before, but now it seems like a great option. I think we should go with that. Right? So you're shaping perception. And because of that, the way they look at the salesperson, the data shows, heavily influences how they perceive the company through the second part of that buying journey. And so it matters so much. So we can't disconnect the salesperson from the company because the salesperson shapes perception of the company, of the product, of the service. And so it matters so much. And so we put them together because we have found that if people trust the salesperson, they'll almost always trust the company. And if they don't trust the salesperson, they'll almost always not want to do business. They feel uneasy about the company. Even though the company and the salesperson might be very dissimilar, it doesn't matter. Our buyers group the perception as one. And so that matters a great deal.
Yeah, and I want to focus a little bit on that word we keep using is perception, because I feel like sometimes it's not fully understood, but it's such a powerful tool. And you and I have talked a little bit before in the pre-call about self-perception and, BEM self-perception theory and how that has an influence on ourselves and others. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that and how our self-perception affects the influence on our buyers.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's such a powerful idea. In fact, we talk about BEM's self-perception theory later on about commitments, how commitments shape our beliefs. In fact, so impactful that people, it's really interesting, people believe much stronger in a commitment after making it than just before. For example, they did one study where they went to all places, a horse race track, and they polled people who were in line to place a bet on a horse, and they asked them a series of questions. One of them was, what horse are you going to bet on? And then, what do you think the likelihood is that horse will win? Then a few minutes later, the people placed the bet. Then the researchers went up to the same people, asked them a series of questions, including, what horse did you bet on? And if it was the same one they said they were going to, they would say, what do you think the likelihood is that that horse will win the race? What they found was fascinating, that people believe much more strongly that the likelihood that the horse will win after placing the bet versus just before. And that study has been replicated in politics with voting behaviors as well as other places as well. And what it shows is that people, after making a commitment, believe more in it than just before. In fact, what we found is through a series of commitments, like what we advocate in selling, because we believe that buying is made up of a series of incremental commitments that guide people on a progression of consent and advance the sale. That's how our brains make buying decisions. As people make certain commitments, it changes what they think about themselves in relation to this purchase. All of a sudden, they become the kind of people who believe in this versus that. For example, we have a client who's priced at the very top of the marketplace. And when they poll prospects before they meet with them, how are you judging this decision? How are you going to make it? Usually price is at the top and quality is more towards the bottom of the list. Well, after talking with the salespeople, they guide them making a series of commitments, and they dominate their competitors, and they're one of the higher priced in the marketplace, but the highest quality. So they guide people in affirming that quality is more important than price. What's really interesting, though, is 10 weeks after the installation of their product. So this is long after the sale has happened. They'll survey their buyers and ask them, why did you purchase? What they find is the number one reason people say they purchased is quality. Price is not even on the list. Whereas before the sales call, before meeting with the salesperson, price is at the top, quality is at the bottom. Now, why would that switch? That's self-perception theory. Through making a series of commitments, we say, I become the kind of person that believes in having quality products, that wouldn't put anything in my business that wasn't high quality. I become that kind of person who's willing to pay more for quality. And so that's what self-perception theory does, is it changes our beliefs about ourselves in relation to something. And the same is true with your buyers. And if you're a salesperson who's watching, you've probably seen this, where people make commitments throughout the sale, and all of a sudden, the whole world just changed. Their beliefs change. They become a different person almost. What happened there? That is self-perception theory. It's incredibly powerful. And when you understand it and you understand what commitments do, it is an absolute game changer.
So to make that more applicable, how could an individual contributor use that knowledge in closing a deal? I want your answer, but and let me know if I'm following this correctly. If I'm using those, those steps of commitments and moving up that commitment ladder, and after I've gotten my buyer to make a commitment, they're going to believe in it even more, correct?
Correct. And the one thing we should mention too is it's not just about getting commitments, but we prepare people for that. So I present in a way, and then when I present something that matters to you, I want to prepare you to act on it. So what's the difference? Why do commitments matter? Commitments change future behavior. So oftentimes we in sales get seduced by comprehension, which means you're presenting to me or I'm presenting to you, and the buyer nods their head and goes, well, that makes sense, and smiles, and we're thinking, well, they're in. And inside their mind, they're thinking, well, I would never do that. Well, that sounds good, but not for us. I don't know that. So commitment stops the flow of information and asks, will they act on this information? And so there's some really neat ways to prepare people for commitment. What we found is you prime people. Priming matters a great deal. There's a lot of wonderful research on this. So what that means is before you ask for a commitment, you want to guide people in affirming the value or the idea that commitment is based on. So for example, if I'm selling science-based sales training, right, what I sell right now, let's just say software. I'm selling software, something I sold in the past. So if I'm selling software, for example, I might present about my software, about some of the features of it, and we're getting buy-in and you're excited about it, but I want to get a commitment. So I might prepare you for that by saying, Maxwell, does it make sense why so many other companies just like yours, when they learn about our software platform, decide to move forward? And you go, makes sense, sure. And then I can go, right now I can go in for a commitment. Well, Maxwell, is this the software platform that you would like to have installed in your business? I'm far more likely now. Now, obviously, I've done a presentation prior to that, but a commitment allows you to create action based on that. So, and not just comprehension, but are they willing to act? And if they're not, I want to know that, right? Because if I don't deal with that now, I'll deal with it later. So I want to deal with it right now while I have the time and I have the information in front of me. So I could say, they might say, well, I'm not sure about that yet. Okay, and then I find out what's going on, whether they just need more information or there's an objection or what's happening. So lack of commitment is always a problem, because here's what the data shows. If they won't commit to something small, they're not going to commit to something big. I mean, if they won't commit to something little, they won't buy from you. And so commitments are the building blocks of the sale. So you got to think about, my sales presentation isn't a play that I just go and hope they like. No, as I present value, I stop and I ask them to respond to it. And more than just that makes sense or do you understand, I want to say, will you act on what I've just shared? If so, great. If not, I find out why and I address it.
Are there certain ways to phrase commitments that you found to be more powerful than others? And what would those more powerful ways be?
Yeah. So the way you establish a commitment, the key is really the priming. What happens directly before the commitment? Like we talked about a few minutes ago with perception. What happens before a commitment shapes my perception of the commitment. Let me give you an example. My favorite way to describe this that we can all relate to is a scary movie or a horror movie. All of us have watched scary or horror movies. Usually it's late at night. And after you turn the movie off, oftentimes you'll hear noises in your house or apartment. You're like, what was that? And you'll check the doors to make sure they're locked. You'll look under the bed, look in closets. And what's going on there? Now, you might have heard that noise 1,000 times before, but that night it prompted you because that movie put your mind in a heightened state of awareness to strange sounds, the horror movie. It shapes perception. Likewise, what happens before a commitment shapes our perception of it. So it's not just presenting, but I want to get buy-in just before the commitment to what the commitment is based on. And if I do that, decades of research and a lot of sales experience will confirm that you're far more likely to guide people in making that commitment because you help them think through it, help them affirm it publicly. And so the way to get commitments, the way you phrase them matters, but what matters even more is what happens directly before the commitment. So guide people in affirming the idea that that commitment is based on.
So to prime someone for commitment, am I doing that through story, for example? What's the best way to prime them for that? Is it to use a story of a customer that has had success, a similar customer, or give me some examples of what are the top methods of priming somebody?
Yeah, many things you can do. So one, you mentioned a third-party story. So a story about a third party, very important. They are a powerful way to persuade. There's really neat science on what's going on in stories. What's fascinating about this, and I'll share it because it matters when we talk about stories, is that what the research shows is for our brains to be influenced by a story, we actually recreate the story in our minds. So as I'm hearing you tell a story about a past customer, I'm recreating it in my mind. In fact, when they hook people up to fMRI machines that measure brain activity, when someone tells a story well and someone listens to it, their brain activity mirrors one another. So you picturing a story to tell it, when I'm listening to it, I'm picturing it as well. So what that tells us is the way you tell a story matters. The more aligned it is with how our brain recreates it, the more persuasive it'll be. And in the book, for example, we walk through real simply the 5 major components of effective storytelling, how you can tell them the way the brain recreates them, which is extremely impactful. So that's a great way to do it. Another is using what we call an involvement trial close right before a commitment. What involvement trial close real simply is, it's where I'm getting you to buy into an idea. So I could say something like, does it make sense why? Or I could say, well, Maxwell, it doesn't sound like you're very excited about this option. What are some of your biggest concerns? And you share it with me. Perhaps it's about a competitor. And you go, well, this, and that. Okay, well, based on that, would you ever really consider this option then for your business? Well, I guess not, no. Right? So I'm preparing you for a commitment. So what you want to do is right before the commitment, focus on either a statement you get buy-in to, a value building statement that's aligned with the commitment, or you can use a story. That's a very effective way to use as well, a third-party story. But usually a statement is very powerful, they buy into, and then you say, well, based on that, and then you go with the commitment.
Awesome stuff. Thank you so much, David. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. Where can our followers, listeners, viewers, where can they learn more about you and, of course, get a copy of your book?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the book is available on Amazon, anywhere fine books are sold. You can pick up your copy of The Science of Selling, and you can go to our website, Hoffeld, Hoffeld group.com. We have all kind of blogs, articles, white papers, podcasts, videos you can look at in our resource center. And then also, if you're on Twitter, connect with me on there at Devid Hoffeld. We have about 102,000 followers, as well as LinkedIn, and we have a YouTube channel as well. So lots of ways to learn more about science-based selling.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, David, for being with us today. We'll have to do it again soon because, again, this is the stuff that I just eat up, and I know that there's so much information in this book that we just don't have enough time today to cover it. But thank you again. Really, really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure, Maxwell. Thank you for having me.
There you have it, my conversation with David. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. Be sure to watch it again. If you enjoyed this video and if you've enjoyed these videos from Help Me Close, please click the thumbs up so that I know we're delivering you the right value that you need to help you close more deals. If there's a special guest that you would like to see, go ahead and send me an email at contact@helpmeclose.com, or better yet, leave me a comment. Write down their name in the comment section so I know who you want to hear from, what questions you have. I'll go ahead and reach out and get them as a guest on our show. Thanks for watching again. Stay tuned, and as always, keep closing.